Hello everyone, I'm really honoured to be here today and thank you very much for the invitation. I'd like to, I think you should all give yourselves a bit of a clap actually. This is a victory. They didn't turn up. And you know why they didn't turn up? Because they knew what a bad look it is. They know that we are speaking the truth and they are just a bunch of thugs and cowards and bullies. Yep. And when our leaders fail us, ordinary people have got to step up and become heroes. And that's what you are. You've become heroes in a really important campaign, a really important moment in history. Now, I might be wrong. They might have decided not to turn up because, they've got better things to do. They might have gone to find some Jewish shopkeepers' windows to smash. Or maybe there's some women's rights books that they've got to burn. Or maybe there's a few democracy activists they've got to beat up. Maybe they're just invading Poland. Who knows? Anyway, the one thing that they do not stand for is free speech. And free speech is what we are claiming here today. You've claimed it, you've won, they lost. Now, I don't know if you know who I am, but I'm an old, very old activist. I've been an environmental and social justice activist in this state for the last 50 years. I'm the founder of the Queensland Greens and I was a co-founder with people like Bob Brown of the Australian Greens. And Libby and I, my wife and I, were having a lovely retirement there a little while back, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago now. And all of a sudden I saw that the convener of the Victorian Greens had been sacked. And she was sacked because she'd written in an article 3 years earlier that the Greens, my political party, the Greens, should be aware of problems that result from having women's-only spaces like change rooms and toilets and prisons and refuges and women's sport invaded by biological men. And I thought, well, that's not an unreasonable thing to say, but she got sacked for it. So I went on Facebook and I said, I thought that was a wrong move by the Greens. They shouldn't do it. I didn't disagree with Greens policy on transgender or anything. I just said, in terms of free speech, this goes right against what the Greens should be about. A number of people came onto my site and made comments. And they usually made comments, a lot of them were making comments along the lines of, we should have sex-based rights, not gender identification as the key means of identifying people. And they were also talking about women's-only spaces. The Greens then told me that while there was nothing that they could object to in my posts, that I had to delete every one of those comments. Every one had to be deleted. And I said, but I believe in free speech. These are legitimate points that these people are making. They're not being defamatory. They're not being abusive. Why should I delete them? And I refused. So they said, well, you're suspended. You're suspended until you delete those comments. Well, that was nearly 3 years ago. In a totally corrupt process, totally corrupt, and I won't go into just the details of it, it's too boring, but they decided that they were going to get rid of me. They were going to cashier me from the Greens. And their motivation, I believe, was if we can do it to Drew Hutton, we can do it to anybody. So keep your head down, the rest of you who think there's such a thing as sex-based rights and not gender identity, because if you put your head up, the same thing's going to happen to you. This is not free speech. And that is a key part, a key plank in why we set the Greens up in the first place. There are 4 pillars of Greens policy originally. Non-violence was one, and I don't believe these people believe in that for a moment, and their behaviour at some of these meetings illustrate that. And they don't believe in democracy because freedom of speech is an integral part of democratic values. So, I went through the internal process. They still maintain that they were going to suspend me. And finally, it just dawned on me, I'm a bit old and a bit slow. So it took me until about February of this year to realise, hey, these people aren't going to give me my membership back. They're never going to give it back. There's only one thing I can do, and that is to actually take the issue into the public arena. That's what I'm doing here today. Now, I've been accused of being a free speech absolutist. I'm not. I think there are limits on free speech. You shouldn't be able to yell fire in a crowded theatre. You shouldn't be able to use, terrible hate speech, especially in situations that can cause enormous harm to people. There have to be limits on free speech. There are limits to all rights. All rights have limits. And those limits are established in a democratic society by people coming together and working out civilly and rationally what those limits should be. Where do you draw the line? Where does one person's individual liberty become another person's nightmare? That has to be done in a process which respects the right of all people to engage in civil and rational discussion and debate. But if it applies to free speech, it applies just as much to transgender rights. They've got limits too. But they don't think they have. They don't think there's any process that they've got to go through to establish where you draw the line on rights. They think that if you just identify as a man, that automatically, if you're a biological male and identify as a woman, that gives you all the rights that women should have. And that's simply wrong. And it has, not only is it wrong in fact, it's wrong in process. The process that should have gone through to establish that was a democratic process where people talk civilly and rationally to each other. They discuss it, they debate it, they work out where the lines are drawn, and they come to a common sense and reasonable outcome at the end that all people can live with, that causes a maximum amount of freedom to everybody and a minimum amount of harm to everybody. That's what democracy, one of the key things that democracy is all about. But today's not about me. Today's about women. Today's about the rights that women have and should have. It's also about safety. I think there are two key issues that are going to become absolutely important. They are important now, and they're going to continue to be important until they're properly resolved. This is one of them. This is this stupid debate, and by the way, I think that some of the people who are taking up this debate on the transgender issue, including the Greens, have become a cult. Nothing else, just a cult. And the problem about cults is that they are totally inward looking, they lose contact with reality, they lose contact with the rest of the community, and ultimately they become irrelevant. And that's what my party's going to become if it keeps going on this course.
It already is.
Already is. So, it is not transphobic for me to say, or for Libby to say, my 9-year-old granddaughter should not be having to get changed in a change room at a swimming pool next to a person with a penis. What is reasonable about that? It is not hate speech. It is not bigoted to say a girl or a woman should not have to compete in a sporting team against a biological male. There is nothing bigoted about that. There is nothing cruel about saying that children who are having problems with identity and problems with who they are and what they're going to be in life, there is nothing cruel about saying you should actually get proper support. Rather than medical interventions, get some proper support to work out just where you're going in life. These are reasonable and common sense and humane assertions that people are making. And it's organisations like the Greens who are simply ignoring that and going off in their own authoritarian directions. Now, I believe in transgender rights. I believe that people who are transgender, who make that decision for themselves, fine. You deserve all the rights that you can get, but you don't deserve the right to impose your desire for unlimited liberty on other people who are going to get hurt by it. Now, Judith Wright, the great Queensland poet and environmentalist, once said, no big struggle, no important struggle is ever finally won. Sooner or later, you're going to have to fight it all again. And she was talking about the Great Barrier Reef, and she led the campaign to protect the Great Barrier Reef. And of course, we've got it again today. We've got to defend it against climate change. But it's, the same thing is true of just about every major step forward in human freedom and human dignity in our lifetimes. You've simply got to fight the same battles over again sometimes. And that's the case here. Male domination, patriarchy, the male violence, all of those things are being resurrected. And it's no small issue. Young men, boys, are being exposed to the sort of pornography, the sort of experiences that they should never be exposed to as children. Never. It is creating the worst possible images of women and females that it could possibly have, and it leads, one of the factors that leads to violence against women, sometimes by the boys themselves. I mean, there's been plenty of cases. The show Adolescence on television is one such example. So I'm afraid this battle is just going to have to keep being fought. And I'm very proud to stand with you in doing that. And I recognise you for your bravery in coming out and making a stand on this. In about a little while after my speech, if there's nobody else going to talk, I'm going to put this somewhere here. I've got a billboard. And it says, support free speech, freedom of speech. Now, talking about fighting battles over again, 42 years ago, I chained myself to a tree, just 100 metres down the road here, to a leopard tree. It was part of the free speech and civil liberties campaigns that we were running back in the early 80s. We had a government here in Queensland under Joe Bajelki-Peterson which banned all public assembly, banned free speech, banned anything that was opposed to anything that particular government stood for. And so I chained myself to a tree and I spoke. Actually, about 2,000 people turned up to hear it, and it took the police half an hour to find a pair of bolt cutters to cut me out. And so I had plenty of time to talk about free speech before I got shoved into a paddy wagon and off to the watch house. But I thought I might commemorate that particular incident and that campaign and emulate the activities of a fellow called Billboard Chris, who came to town a few weeks ago and put a billboard on and walked into the mall. Now, I'm not going to impede anybody. I'm not going to even talk. I'm just going to walk there with this sign on. I'm going to stand there for a few minutes and then I'm going to go. And I'd ask the police not to give me a move on order because I'm not going to hurt anybody. But we have that campaign that we ran, by the way, in the 80s, led to, in 1992, the Peaceful Assembly Act. The Peaceful Assembly Act says you can public speak, you can have a rally, you can assemble with or without authorisation, with or without. I won't have authorisation to do this, but the Act says I can. And I'm going to illustrate that that's a key plank in our history. We fought for it and we want to keep it. And we're not going to let organisations like the Greens or anybody else, and by the way, the Queensland State Government, which has it in their legislation, saying this sort of rubbish, we're not going to let them take it away from us.
No.
Now, when I was running the Lock the Gate campaign against coal seam gas in Western Queensland in the early days, dozen or so years ago, I met an old farmer, a woman farmer, who said to me, Drew, every now and then, or at some point, you've got to put a spear in the ground. And what she meant by that was, you've got to take a stand. When the time's right, when you feel that it's intolerable, you take a stand. You're brave. You act with courage. Ordinary people have to become heroes. Now that's going to happen with this movement, I'm sure. They're only a small group here today, but people out there know that what we're saying is true. And what they're saying is a bunch of lies, it's authoritarian, it's against the spirit that a democratic society should embody. We're going to put our spear in the ground. And if organisations like the Greens think that that's something that they've got to snuff out, then watch out, they're going to get hit by a freight train. Thank you. By the way, women, life, freedom. Somebody went on Facebook and told me that you shouldn't have a slogan like women, life, freedom because that belongs to Trump. What a load of crap. They're three great words, three great concepts. And the freedom one is the one especially that I'm going to be espousing as I walk into the mall. Thank you.